progress of Tikkun Olam, making this world a better place. You see, that was the message. That's what it was all about. When we face our Creator in 120 years, He will ask us the question, what did you do to fix the world? What did you do to make the world a better place? Some will say we had great families. We brought harmony. We did Bikur Cholim. We visited the sick. We gave charity. That's how we made the world a better place. Then the Borei Olam will smile and say thank you.
Now I'd like to call upon three speakers who are from our shul and who presented another perspective on the rabbi. First, our current Vice President, Mr. Mark Dweck.
During these past 30 days, I've been struck by how many people have uttered the same words about the rabbi. I had a special relationship with the rabbi. This even came from people whom I had never ever seen attending the synagogue. And indeed, every one of those people was exactly right. They did have a special relationship with the rabbi. I wondered how that could be. And then I thought of what I felt was my own special relationship with the rabbi. Though I knew of Rabbi Labaton my whole life, I did not really form a relationship with him until about 17 years ago when I moved to the area. Prior to that, I had been a transplant from Brooklyn, living on another part of the Jersey Shore. And believe it or not, actually driving back into Brooklyn one night a week to attend a class I really enjoyed. That was when a friend of mine suggested that I attend Rabbi Labaton's class. I did, and the rest is history. When it came time to move, we rented on Dwight Drive, and I started attending West Hill. From the moment I started attending the synagogue, I knew something was different. Having been a shul goer my whole life, I was surprised to see how strongly I felt connected to the synagogue and the rabbi. I had never felt that way before, and I knew then that when it came time to purchase a house, I would need to be within striking distance of the shul, and that's exactly what my wife and I did. As I got more involved with the shul and the rabbi, I was privy to see how the rabbi operated, and I learned from him how important it was to take each and every person into account. Case in point was the Shabbat First Minyan class. It's not easy finding someone to give the class, but I can tell you that he constantly found new people to give them. Sometimes, other people would suggest potential class givers, and as was the practice, it always went to Rabbi Labaton for his approval. It was at those times that I saw his goodness shine so brightly. Whereas I would ask, could the person give a good class? Will the people like it? The rabbi would ask one more vital question that would sometimes outrank all other considerations. What would the effect be on the class giver himself if he was given the opportunity to give the class? Might it bring that person closer to Yahadut? Might it bring that person closer to synagogue life in general? How good and meaningful would it be for that person to give the class? The effect on the individual himself was always critically important for the rabbi. Amongst First Minyan class givers, however, no one ever generated more excitement than Rabbi Labaton himself. People would alter their schedules if they knew he was giving the class. People from Brooklyn would contact me to find out when he was giving the class so that they could come in for the weekend or specifically sponsor the First Minyan breakfast in his honor. And this was the only time where, I admit it, I actually used my position as the class organizer to my personal advantage, and I would purposely not schedule his class on a particular week if I knew I was going to be out of town for for that Shabbat. Sounds beautiful, right? Well, it was, but it was not without complications. You see, everyone wanted the rabbi for himself. So pulling him out of the main minyan in order to attend the first minyan was no easy feat. There was a particular congregant, a humble man, who doesn't really draw attention to himself, whom the rabbi really didn't want to upset due to the rabbi's absence from the main minyan that day. And as a result, the rabbi would actually decline to give the class. I was flabbergasted. I said, Rabbi, it's one person for one morning. They'll get over it. But he was unyielding. He said this person had been coming to the synagogue for 20 plus years, day in and day out, had been attending classes as well, all of those years. And therefore he felt this person deserved that kind of respect in return. One person versus a whole minyan. I was amazed, but I saw then and there how strongly he felt about each and every person. Another shul matter that he and I regularly worked on was the schedule for the holiday prayers. I always enjoyed that because the actual schedule only took a few minutes to figure out, but we talked for an hour anyway about all other topics. Even then, he would think of the schedule on an individual level. What do I mean? Sometimes there was a spot in the schedule, for example, mincha on Erev Chag, where you could start earlier or later. He would say, well, I know that this particular person likes to get home early and eat early, so perhaps we should start earlier that day. Or the opposite. So-and-so is working that day, so it's going to be difficult for him to make it again if we make it earlier. So perhaps we should have the later start time. He was always thinking about each and every individual as an individual. He was just wired that way. I personally experienced this individual attention many times. Although I was a regular Baal Koreh in the first minyan, I would sometimes need to fill in the main minyan. I can tell you that any time I did, as soon as I was finished reading, the rabbi would come up to the bimah with that fantastic smile of his and say to me, great job, really great job. You could see the genuine appreciation in his face. Mind you, I had been reading for years, but I can tell you that whenever he did that, I felt like it was my bar mitzvah all over again, and I would leave the shul that day, all giddy. My family would always ask me, Dad, I just don't understand it. How can you leave the house on Saturday morning at 7 o'clock to go to shul and not come back until after 12? What are you doing there for all of that time? And so I would explain that, well, there was praying, and then there was the class, of course, after first minyan, at which point they'd jump in and say, okay, so that's 10:30. Then where are you for the next hour and 45 minutes? That's when I tell them about the best part. I'd explain that I always wanted to hear the rabbi's speech. They were unique, well-crafted, thought-provoking, and always, always something new. Somehow, after 30 years, he was still coming up with something new to say each and every week. They were the best speeches I ever heard. And then when the speech was over, I would say, well, it's only a few more minutes before the minyan lets out. And he'd finish praying and come out into the hallway, as he always did, and I'd get to converse with him along with the others. But it was the walk home from shul together that was the cherry on top of all of this. It was a short walk, but it totally made my week, as we would discuss whatever was top of mind. A point in his speech, a shul matter, family, or our treasured New York Yankees. It was indeed a very dear few minutes of time with him. But his fantastic personality extended for me beyond the synagogue as well. I've run a few marathons, and after every single one, he would express the same wondrous amazement to me. How did you do that? That's amazing. This coming from someone who regularly ran 5 miles every night on his treadmill. It made me feel like I had actually won the race. As you all know, the rabbi was passionate about the New York Yankees, and in that, we also shared a connection. Every Shabbat during the season, I would find out from someone in First Minyan if the Yankees had won or lost the night before. Then at some point, I would walk into the main Minyan, and while standing right there in the back, I'd make eye contact with the rabbi, at which point I'd give him a thumbs up or down to let him know what the Yankees had done. A thumbs up always elicited a big smile with a discreet fist bump, and then I'd slip out and he'd go back to his prayers. Simple and quick, just another little something we had between us. Whenever he would call me to discuss any matter, if the Yankees had won the night before, he'd always begin the conversation the same way. Great job last night, great job. He was actually congratulating me as if I had managed the team or something. As some of you know, the rabbi would record Yankee games and then watch them as he jogged at night. But this was 2009, and the Yankees were on the brink of winning the World Series. The rabbi had figured he would watch the recorded version as he always did. But this time, Emily, in her wisdom, said to him that he needed to be going through it and feeling it in the moment, like all the other fans were. I guess you could say it was the Yankee version of Peror Am Hadrat Melech. Then, to my surprise and glee, I received a call from him at the end of the 8th inning, and we stayed on the phone watching the rest of the game together, basking in the celebration that ultimately ensued. It made that win even more special. But my favorite Yankee connection was when he had come back from a trip to the Baseball Hall of Fame in Cooperstown, and he presented me with a Mariano Rivera bobblehead doll. Imagine that, this super busy person with so much on his plate at all times takes the time to buy that just for me. And yes, I am proud to say that as a grown man, that doll still sits on the night table next to my bed, to the complete befuddlement of my kids, who think it hysterical that Daddy has a doll that he cares about so much and finds so special. That was the rabbi. He was that person to whom I could ask any halakhic question and know that no question was off limits, and that he would approach the question with a totally open mind, and he was willing to venture and explore the limits of halakha while always staying ever true to the halakha. I could discuss any topic with him, great books, the news, sports, existential issues, and personal life issues. The passion that he brought to just about anything inspired me to try and be the best person I could be in an effort to emulate him. Simply put, he was not only my rabbi, but he was, despite our difference in age, a truly great friend and confidant. You could see why I felt I had a special relationship with him, and yet I know I am not alone in that regard. Many of you could be standing up here right now telling your version of that special relationship you had with the rabbi. As it has been said before, the term rabbi was too limited for him. Brilliant, check. Leader, check. Teacher, check. But he had that extra special something that made people gravitate to him and want to be part of his circle. This was seeing his treasured concept of Tselem Elokim in action every day. There have been too many times over the last 30 days when I have read something interesting in a book or had some troubling thought that needed some discussion, and I've reached my phone to call him only to find that I can't. When I thought about the concept of Sadiq Vedalo and why Hashem had done this to such a wonderful man at such a young age, it was to the rabbi whom I normally reach out in order to have that discussion. But then the realization that I could no longer do that overwhelms me, and I would just put the phone down and stare sadly into space, pondering that empty feeling in my heart. Even my children, young as they are, feel it. As my daughter sadly said to me the other day, I always pictured Rabbi Labaton speaking at my wedding, but now that's not going to happen. It is terribly difficult to reconcile with the reality that he is no longer with us. Indeed, he spoiled us by always coming back after various episodes of his fight with this dreaded disease. So why wouldn't he come back this time? Yet sadly, that was not the case. Emily, you and the rabbi did a wonderful job raising your family together. As I recently mentioned to you the remark my kids made after visiting during the Shiva, I just like that family. And I know many of us feel the same way. To Sarah, Ovadia, Dvorah, Mordechai, Your special Father lives on in you as he does in so many of us. He was quite simply an incredible person with so many fantastic qualities. But as Rabbi Ovadia suggested at the arayat for the Shiva, we can't expect to duplicate everything that he was because he had so many wonderful strands about him. But if we could emulate just one of those strands, we'd be ahead of the game and doing a service to his memory. For me, it was this idea of treating each and every person in such a way that it results in a special relationship. It's not always easy, and it certainly takes time. But just as he managed to take the time with his incredibly busy schedule, so too can I try to do that. I miss him terribly, but his memory lives on in me. The thought of that bright smile of his always uplifted me.
And now I'd like to call upon Mr. Raymond Sacca, past president of Magen David, a man who was so integrally involved with the shul and had a long-standing relationship with the rabbi.
Thank you, Elliot. Incredible amount of waves today. It's unbelievable. I would like to thank the family for allowing me to share a few words with you here today. It's an article that I actually wrote in the Image magazine that's going to come out soon. To Rabbi Labaton, my rabbi, my teacher, my friend. Rabbi, it's no coincidence that you left us on the week of Parashat Vayigash. The word Vayigash means to come close. In one of the most powerful episodes of Sefer Bereshit, Yosef tells his brothers, Geshu na elai. Yosef asks his brothers to come close, to be united, to forget the past, and to be a family again. The most important thing for Yosef was for his family to become close and united. And the pasuk continues, Vayigashu, and the brothers came close. At the end of the parasha, the famine in Egypt is discussed. But in Goshen, the pasuk says, Vayifru vayibu me'od. Only there, where the Jews were united, did they become fruitful and multiply. It's also no coincidence, Rabbi, that you passed away on the 8th day of Hanukkah. If we rearrange the letters of the dreidel, Nun, Gimel, Hey, and Shin, we get the word Goshna. The Maccabim were only victorious because of their focus on unity. Rabbi Labaton, your weekly messages were often about unity. One of your missions in life was unity and closeness. You knew that in order for our community to succeed, we must be united. To that end, you taught us about making a difference in the world. You taught us about treating every person with dignity and respect. You taught us to find the best in each person and give him or her the benefit of the doubt. You taught us that the secret to success is communication. But more importantly, you taught us how to communicate. You taught us that the three key ingredients in life are ethics, morality, and spirituality. Along with family, community, and unity, one of your most important messages was about personal growth. You taught us to strive to be the best that we can be. When I finished high school and was considering starting work or going to college, You told me, Raymond, money comes and goes, but knowledge will last forever. Rabbi, you were my guiding light. We had so many conversations about doing the right thing. I fondly remember the time she called my office. I would pick up the phone with tremendous energy and greet you. Rabbi Mori, my rabbi, my teacher. For you were truly both. You called me sometimes just to say thank you. Other times you called me to discuss a difficult situation. Oftentimes, when I thought I could only spare 2 minutes, we'd end up speaking for 45 minutes. How glad I am that we did. Through every conversation we had, you were only interested in the pursuit of truth. Honesty was your signature. Your guiding principle was, what do you think Hashem would want you to do? When I was president of the synagogue and faced challenging circumstances, you used to tell me, don't worry, I'll take care of it. You weren't afraid of a challenge, as long as you knew it served a greater good. Anytime I wanted to have a program in the shul, you were so supportive and blessed me for all my efforts. You were my beacon of strength, as you were for so many others. You were especially tolerant and understood that every congregant had different needs, whether they were spiritual, intellectual, or emotional. You always met those needs with sensitivity and respect, catering to each congregant on his or her level. Rabbi Labaton, you taught us so many vital life lessons. It seems trivial to say how sorely you will be missed. I am so grateful that my children were blessed to have known you. You were an integral part of my family's life, both on a daily basis and during momentous occasions. You married Camille and me. You attended all 3 of my daughters' bat mitzvah Shabbatons. You traveled to Israel for my son's bar mitzvah. I always assumed you'd be here to marry my children too. Rabbi, your words and teachings will resonate within me all the days of my life. And I will continue to teach my children your ways. I am forever thankful that I had the privilege to be your student, your colleague, and your friend. To Mrs. Doris Labaton, Mrs. Sari Hedaya, Mrs. Robin Levinson, to Emily, Sarah Gavi and baby Ezra, Ovadia, Devorah and Micah, and Mordechai. May Hashem bless you with strength to continue the Rabbi's ways. Tehi nishmato sirura v'srura hayim.
Our last speaker will be followed by Hashkara and Abit. Next speaker, former president of Magen David, and someone who gave many, many years, worked extremely hard with the rabbi for the success of this Bet Knesset, Mr. Michael Mishon.
So much has been said. Each and every day since we lost him, I've been thinking about what Rabbi Labaton meant to me and to so many in our community. I've been thinking about what I will do without him, what we will do without him. To whom will we turn for advice on the halakha in a given situation? To whom will we turn with a personal issue or problem? What was it about him that makes him so irreplaceable? What was it about him? At the arayat during the Shiva, Rabbi Hayim Ovadia spoke so well
when he described Rabbi Labaton as an integrated, wholesome person, all of his many qualities emanating from the same essence, from his humility, his integrity, his honesty. Closing his remarks, Rabbi Ovadia challenged us to choose just one of the roles played by Rabbi Labaton, to own it for ourselves, and to do all we could to emulate the rabbi and to develop that role, that quality to our greatest ability. The roles or qualities that Rabbi Ovadia identified with Rabbi Labaton were the great educator, the community builder, the freedom fighter, the loving father, and in the way of Moshe Rabbeinu and David HaMelech, a ro'et son, the compassionate pastor. To this list, I would add another persona, one that inspired me and has had a great impact on my life. I'm talking about Rabbi Labaton, the pious intellectual. For me, Rabbi Labaton reconciled my curiosity with my tradition. I first encountered Rabbi Labaton when I was about 10 or so years old. He was a senior counselor at Magen David Day Camp, and I was a young camper. Chacham Baruch, Alaf HaShalom, incidentally, was the camp's rabbi. So when Rabbi Labaton first came to West Deal in 1982, I had fond memories of him and remembered him as the one counselor who was always with kippah and tzitzit. In 1982, I was already attending college. Success there seemed to be predicated on an ability to question, to consider, to be open to different perspectives and points of view. How could one learn otherwise? Yet my religious education to that point really had discouraged that line of thinking. Before Rabbi Labaton, there was a choice to be made between open inquiry and halachic observance. If one did not want to fall off the derech, one had to severely constrict his exposure to society at large. One was discouraged from asking certain questions, or too many questions. Rabbi Labaton just didn't seem to fit that picture. So one day, I stopped by his office to talk with him. Actually, I came to him because I thought, unlike other rabbis I had learned with previously, he would actually be open to discussing his sermon from the previous Shabbat. Met with a warm reception, a conversation about the parasha, moved to a discussion of science and philosophy, and back again. Finding a willing teacher, my questions came fast and furious. Not only did he have answers, he showed me where they came from our Torah and from our tradition. Furthermore, not only did he show me where the answers came from, unlike any rabbi I had previously encountered, he encouraged me to ask more questions. In fact, I remember the day when I told him I wanted to learn more. He asked me to hold out my hands, and he loaded me up with a half dozen books on Jewish history and philosophy. In giving me these books, the rabbi was at once showing me that there was a whole lot more to Limud Torah than I had been shown, and also that it was there for me to acquire if I could just make the effort. We still have one more book to go. The first great lesson that I learned from a Rabbi Labaton then was to be proud of my Jewish inheritance, to be proud of my Torah. It could stand up to any intellectual challenge, and I should not cede any ground to those intellectuals or rabbis who argue to the contrary. Rather, the Almighty had given us Torah Emet, and the search for Torah was the search for truth. They were one and the same. Rabbi Labaton also showed me that although choices most definitely did have to be made, Halakha was there to guide us in making those choices, and if one would consult Halakha, oftentimes one could find a path forward. As he used to say, Torah need not be a wall, rather it could be a filter. His love for ideas and his appreciation for nuance and detail, for situation and context, made him a true intellectual, one whose powers of critical thinking ranked right up there with any university professor. But unlike many thinkers to whom I have been exposed, Rabbi Labaton was more than an intellectual. He was an honest intellectual, willing to evaluate and consider other points of view. We live in the age of the internet and social media, a time when the dizzying pace of technology has enabled us to connect without conversation. Anyone with an idea can have a blog, and there seems to be unlimited bandwidth and an endless number of cable channels. But as our politicians talk past each other and fundamentalists fight fundamentalists from DC to Damascus, ideas have increasingly been liberated from experience. We find intellectuals who are so enamored of their own ideas that they take little time to check their ideas against reality. Often we find intellectuals who seem to lack a moral compass, or who have trouble relating their ideas to people. Not so, Rabbi Labaton. Torah was his filter, his compass, his grounding. He was very concerned with halakha, and this made him pious. And as much as he loved Torah, he loved people. He loved interacting with them, and he loved helping them. This love of Torah and his ability to relate to people made him very spiritual. A pious intellectual. It's almost a contradiction in terms.